Welcome back to Civilnet. I'm your host, Patrick Elliott. I'm delighted to be joined today by Congressman Frank Pallone and an avid defender of Armenia and Armenian interests. And Congressman, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Patrick.
So you just came back from a trip to Baku, of all places. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened? It seems that there was a little bit of a kerfuffle over there, and you also had Azeri state agents who tried to hinder your work, and it even got to an actual threat to your physical safety.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, Patrick, was, of course, I was there primarily for the COPs, the climate conference, but I also wanted to use it as an opportunity to try to see if we could, address some of the Armenian concerns. Obviously, I don't want any more military aggression by Azerbaijan against Armenia. That's the primary focus, but also like to have the prisoners that were taken when Azerbaijan attacked Artsakh and ethnically cleansed Artsakh and took the leadership of Artsakh back to Baku. But all these things, President Aliyev wouldn't agree to do any of that. I mean, he actually agreed to a meeting. We tried to set up a meeting with him with our U.S. COP delegation, and he agreed to it, but he said that it would only take place if I wasn't there. But the main problem that I faced was that when I arrived and during the conference, there were maybe 20 or 30 so-called reporters, I don't even know if they were, who, with their iPhones had sort of coordinated their efforts to harass me. But then it really got bad when we got back to the hotel, the Marriott Hotel that first night, and there were protesters, supposedly protesters, who, threatened me with physical harm. If it wasn't for the fact that we had some security people that were hired by the U.S. Embassy, they probably would have beaten me up and I would have ended up in the hospital. But all this was orchestrated, and I know that because, we had contacts with the police in Azerbaijan who told us that this was all orchestrated by the government, that it wasn't a real protest. And just so you know, when the reporters were harassing me, they were all coordinating what they had to say. Pallone, go home. Pallone is a lobbyist paid for by Armenia. And then when we got to the hotel, there were many entrances to the hotel that we could have gone through instead of the main entrance where the protesters were. But the hotel, which is owned by the government, the hotel, said that we couldn't go. We had to go through the main entrance, which of course necessitated, being met by the so-called protesters. So it was all an effort to harass me, to physically assault me if possible. And it's a shame, Patrick, because, myself and other members of the Armenian caucus, both in the House and the Senate, Democrat and Republicans, before we went to Baku, we were making some major efforts to try to say that, this was an opportunity for Azerbaijan to show that they wanted peace with Armenia. They could exchange prisoners. They could, make some progress towards a peace agreement. And a lot of that seemed to be maybe moving in that direction 2 or 3 weeks before. But then the last week, it kind of all broke down. And part of, we knew that because a couple of days before we arrived, President Aliyev had some sort of event where he criticized the French and the Dutch delegations, basically their response to that was they weren't going to even go to the conference. So I think it was a lost opportunity. It really was. And then when the meeting did take place with Aliyev without me, the members of Congress who were there brought up the same issues that I would have brought up. Mainly, we don't want any more military aggression and we want a peace agreement. And he just brushed that aside and blamed Armenia and said, well, Armenia's the agitator, Armenia is the aggressor. Armenia was the aggressor in Artsakh. Armenia continues to be an aggressor. I'm a peaceful guy. They're the ones that are at fault. And the reason we don't have a peace agreement is because of Armenia, not me. So it was just a lost opportunity. I don't know how else to describe it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a convenient enemy to have for a dictatorship. But yeah, I mean, it also should be noted, this is a country where you had any independent media that was rounded up and put in prison before COP. So these so-called journalists is quite interesting. It's a place where protests are not tolerated. So again, for them to be protesting outside your hotel seems a little bit kind of fishy, to say the least. But I mean, help us understand, what do you think motivated them to use these kinds of intimidation tactics? I mean, it seems kind of brazen, no?
I think that the government in Azerbaijan, which, as you say, is President Aliyev, is a dictatorship. In my opinion, the reason they stay in power is because they use Armenia as the enemy, right? In other words, you know, not that I had a lot of time talking to the average person, but it was pretty clear to me just for the few conversations I had with Azerbaijanis who were not, you know, part of this effort to thwart me. They're really not. They don't like the government. They think the government is a dictatorship. The government is not really helping them economically. All the oil money is going towards, you know, either the oligarchs or, you know, wealthy people, and so I think that part of this is Aliyev's effort to, you know, have Armenia as a continuous enemy, on the fear on his part that if there was peace and Armenia was no longer an enemy, then he would no longer have a reason to be in charge, and, you know, Azerbaijan could move towards democracy, or at least not have him in charge as a dictator. You know, it's a classic case. I mean, I don't want to. You know, this is often what happens with dictators, right? They come up with an external enemy to justify their continued existence. And I think that's the problem that we face. And every time, you know, the Armenian government thinks that they're making progress, which I think they did think so before COPS, you know, it gets thwarted for this reason. But I still think we have to try because, you know, peace in the region is good. You know, if we could have the prisoners leave, if Azerbaijan could sign a peace treaty, withdraw its troops from the part of Armenia that it occupies, everyone benefits from, you know, a peaceful Caucasus. But that's not going to be that easy, unfortunately, based on my experience last week.
Congressman, earlier you mentioned that, you know, what ultimately really did save you was security provided by the U.S. Embassy. Can you tell us, I mean, this is, as I said, it's a brazen assault on a U.S. congressman. I mean, what sort of response is the United States preparing for this?
Well, I think that the embassy did not think this was going to happen because, as I said, prior to my arrival, or prior to the week or so before my arrival, when Aliyev did this dust up with France and the Netherlands, you know, the U.S. and the Armenian government saw this as an opportunity, you know, to make progress on peace and exchange of prisoners. I mean, not exchange, and release of prisoners. So we were all taken aback. You know, we still thought, even when I arrived, that there might be an opportunity with the meeting with President Aliyev to, you know, move towards some progress on peace and prisoners. So we kind of all were taken by surprise. And, you know, I don't know, I don't want to criticize anybody because I was taken by surprise as well. I didn't think this was going to happen. We have, I know that the U.S. Embassy has, you know, I don't know what you call it, complained or, you know, told the State Department and the Azeri government this was unacceptable. But, you know, to be honest, I know maybe I'm just being, you know, how I am. You know, I'm more interested in trying to move forward on this peace agreement than pressing, you know, the fact that I was mistreated, because, you know, I've been involved, as you know, with the Armenia Caucus and Armenia issues for a long time. And my goal is to try to achieve a peace in this area, not continue to say, oh, you're bad because you tried to beat me up, so to speak.
I understand. Congressman, one thing that's remarkable about you is you seem to have broken rank with, let's say, the wider political sphere in the United States, in that you're openly speaking about the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh that took place last year. You're openly speaking about, you know, the right of return for 110,000 people
yes.
to go home. You know, and we had the world rally around Ukraine, which is a struggling young democracy that's fighting against an authoritarian, oil-rich neighbor. And we have a parallel situation over here, and Armenia is not seeing even a fraction of that kind of solidarity. What message do you think we're sending to the world? Speaking as somebody who grew up in the West, right? Someone who believes in Western values, who believes in upholding the torch of liberty, right? The United States, which is the beacon on the hill. What message are we sending to the world if Baku is not punished for ethnically cleansing a region that had Armenian inhabitants continually for 3,000 years?
Well, Patrick, I know I'm going to sound real cynical, but you and I have studied Armenian history, and I don't care if you go back 1,000 years or 2,000 or 3,000. Armenia is usually on its own, right? I mean, whether it's Persia or it's Russia or it's the U.S. or whoever it is, nobody's really helped them. Nobody's really come to their assistance. They're always on their own. They always have to defend themselves. So I'm going to continue to push that the U.S. should object to the ethnic cleansing, that that the people of Artsakh should be able to go back. They should be able to lead a peaceful life in Artsakh. But I mean, my record, the U.S.'s record is not good any more than Russia's record is good or Iran's record is good. It's just not. And so for me, the most important thing is if the two countries can get together and come to some kind of a peace agreement themselves, because I don't know how much any of them, Armenia or Azerbaijan can, really rely on anybody else. The superpowers are always around. They never seem to be much concerned about Armenia. And so we'll continue to push the U.S., but, this is a rough area, has been for 3,000 years. And you just kind of have to look out for yourself, to be honest, as much as you can. As far as return to Artsakh, again, I would say that, some kind of a peace agreement, I think, is best way for that to happen as well. Because, we could talk, I think that Artsakh should have its own government, that it should have a referendum and decide on its own, the people there, whether or not, what their future status is. But right now, because Azerbaijan has the military clout and has kicked everybody out, you're not going to be able to go back militarily, certainly not now. You're not going to have another war that's going to lead to the resurrection of Artsakh. So the goal really would be to try to have a peaceful agreement, and then part of that or after that would be that people are allowed to return and live there peacefully. That would be the goal. I'm just trying to be realistic. As opposed to, I don't think a military solution is good, right now, because Azerbaijan won the battle militarily, and I'd be afraid that they would continue to win militarily. And so the best thing is to try to come to a peace agreement. Now, in the meantime, though, we're still trying to build up Armenia's defenses. I mean, I've been advocating for the U.S. to provide weapons and advanced technology to Artsakh. The French are already, doing that or about to do it. So we still want to provide the military and the equipment so that Armenia can defend itself in the event of another war. But I do worry that that Azerbaijan has the military advantage right now, and so talking about another war is not to our benefit, in my opinion.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're all worried about another war, and we also hope for peace over here. Congressman, thanks again for your time.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Good to see you. Take care. Are you in Yerevan? Is that where you are?
Yep. I'm in Yerevan.
All right. You take care. Thanks.
Thank you, Congressman.
Bye.
Thanks again for watching Civilnet.